Welcome, all you denizens of podcast land. It's Friday night. You know what that means. It is time for your latest episode of The Fortress of Rock, featuring your gracious, humble host, that would be me, the Maestro Kevin Crane, episode 112 here, taping Friday, October the 6th, 2023. Weather's starting to turn here in the upper Midwest. I've always said we don't get fall and spring. We get about 5.5 months of summer and about 6.5 months of winter. And it looks like this particular weekend is where the worm turns and everything goes to hell in a handbasket in terms of weather. But I digress. Jam-packed episode for you this week. I have already told Doc Brown to have the rock and roll DeLorean ready to go on a long journey back in time. In segment 3, I want to go back. Plenty to review in segment 2 with Brian Setzer, Rival Sons, Dokken, and the Rolling Stones. Boy, have I got to talk about the Rolling Stones in segment 2. But of course, what is life without definite patterns, habits, consistencies? As always, we start off with News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen here in segment 1. Lots and lots of live music to talk about, despite the fact that the summer concert season has come and gone. Again, maybe a tie-in to that weather remark at the beginning. But we're already looking ahead to 2024. This is about the time. It's a little early, but this is about the time where bands, greedy bands especially, because they want your money 7, 8 months out, 9 months out, 10 months out, here in October for shows in late summer 2024. And that's all you guys know. That's always been a pet peeve of mine. Doesn't matter if the band is great, mediocre, or awful. And the Foo Fighters love to do this. I remember the last time I went to see them, we had to buy tickets way, way, way ahead of time. And it looks like 2024 will be no exception, as tickets go on sale, I believe today, if not today, next Friday, for the Foo Fighters, 12 baseball stadium dates in late summer 2024. Impressive roster of opening acts. Of course, through the 12 shows, these acts will shuffle in and out. But the Pretenders, and then it gets ridiculously good. Mammoth, WVH. I think Wolfie will open or tour with any big band. He just wants to put his name on the contract and get out there and play. Good for him. I'm worried he's going to burn himself out, is what I'm worried about. And then, of course, the Hives. The Hives. Oh, my God. The Hives and the Foo Fighters together, that could be the greatest show of all time. And I'm not kidding, and I don't think I'm overstating it, at least from my personal perspective. For me. Let's say that. For me. That would be the greatest lineup of all time. Unfortunately, like I said, it's only right now 12 baseball stadiums, nothing in Chicago. The closest to where I reside would be Cincinnati, which is a very, very long haul. So hopefully more dates will be added for the 2024 Foo Fighters tour. On a much smaller scale, now that most dates have been set, the Eagles have added 2 more shows to their farewell tour in January, both in Los Angeles. And I could have swore I heard them say that they were going to have one of those longer farewell tours, like Kiss, like Leonard Skinner, and of course they backed away from, of course, now saying that they're on a farewell tour, which of course half these bands, if not more, do. But some of the stories I read about these two tour dates being added for the Eagles in January in Los Angeles they're acting like, well, that's going to be it. They're a California band. They're going to wrap it up in LA in January and they're done. And I swear, I could have swore when we talked about this a couple months ago that the Eagles were planning to continue this through 2024 bare minimum. If they're slamming the brakes on this thing in January, and you know it's not because tickets are not selling, because you know they're selling. I know they had to add a second date in Indianapolis because tickets went so fast. Again, I'm not believing the innuendo, the insinuations that this is the end for the Eagles in January of 2024. I believe there is going to be more tour dates, more shows added throughout 2024. Now, they might not do a 4 or 5 year farewell extravaganza like Kiss, but just the same, too short of a farewell tour. Queen and Adam Lambert kicked off the fall leg of their Rhapsody tour here this past Wednesday in Baltimore. Now, I have never seen Queen, obviously, never had a really fair shot at seeing them with Freddie Mercury, and I'm sure the same could be said for a lot of you out there. I've been toying with the idea of going to see them with Adam Lambert. He is, I have to say it, he is probably the best fit for the band to take the place of Freddie Mercury. When they tried Paul Rodgers, I don't think that went over very well. So if you get a chance, go check out Queen and Adam Lambert. Bruce Springsteen has just here today as we tape the Fortress of Rock rescheduled almost all of those tour dates that he has had to postpone here in 2023 because of his peptic ulcer. Smartly, this time around, now we've seen this with Skid Row, we talked about this recently as well. If you know you've got a problem, if you know you've got a health issue where you need to rest, make sure you schedule big time rest in at some point during the tour, and that's exactly what Bruce Springsteen and his handlers have done as they have rescheduled these postponed 2023 dates into 2024. He will play about half, not exactly, but roughly half of the U.S. dates in March and April, take a long break, nearly 4 months, and then come back and finish up in August and September. There are some Canadian dates there he needs to still reschedule, has not figured those out logistically yet, I guess. But this is a smart move. The man is getting old. Now with this peptic ulcer, give the guy a break. Schedule things so that he doesn't burn himself out. He has already given enough to rock and roll. I know I'm sounding like a sycophant. I have my problems with Bruce Springsteen. I'm sure I've brought a lot of them up over the last few years on the Fortress of Rock. But you cannot deny the fact the man brings it live. Maybe not on this tour. Maybe that ties into the health issue. Who knows? But good that they are responsibly rescheduling this tour. Now, of course, last week we talked about the excitement surrounding the opening of the Sphere in Las Vegas, Nevada, with U2. Well, they definitely opened it up on September the 29th. By all accounts, things went off fairly well. I would love if I heard somebody else. I'm not going to take credit for this. I'm going to poach something from somebody else, an unnamed source, who said, if I had a ton of disposable income, man, would I love to go out and see this show at the Sphere, this U2 show, playing the entirety, by the way, of Achtung Baby, by far their best album ever. Now, I happened to speak to somebody at my place of employment this week who just happened to come back from a conference in Las Vegas, and she was ranting and raving about, she didn't get to go see the U2 show. Okay, so let's not go there, but just the Sphere itself and what you see flying in to Las Vegas. As she said, flying in, it was just a huge moon projected on the Sphere. So it looked like the moon was on the surface of the earth. And then she also said at one point they turned it into a big, massive pumpkin. Again, if I was rich, man, would I love to go out and see U2 in the Sphere, playing my favorite U2 album. If you're rich, go do it. Man, but I would love to see this Sphere. It has got to be something special, and I've got to believe it costs an unbelievable amount of money to keep this thing running. I mean, just bear with me, old school thinking here. I mean, what happens if it goes down? What happens if it's blowing circuits, lights, whatever it might be on the surface? Inside during a show, the upkeep on the Sphere has got to be a monumental monthly bill. Not only just, even if it's running well, sheer electricity bill alone out in the desert in Vegas has got to be ridiculous. And of course, we know it's the Valley of Neon. So these casinos are used to astronomical electric bills, but still, this Sphere might take it to a whole nother level. Then we've got the Power Trip Festival this weekend in Indio, California. Of course, when it was first announced, we discussed it. And again, another road trip I would have loved to have taken. 3 nights starting tonight. Tonight, I believe, is Guns N' Roses and Iron Maiden. Tomorrow night, Judas Priest and AC/DC. AC/DC playing live for the first time in a long, long time. And then Sunday, Tool and Metallica. Whew! There's a lineup for you, kids. Again, if you're rich, go do it. Get a last-minute ticket. You're going to miss tonight if you listen to this right after I put it out. But fly out tomorrow morning on your private jet. Get to see the last 2 shows at least. Then finally, semi-concert news, kinda, sorta. Geddy Lee is putting out his much anticipated memoir, biography, autobiography, whatever you want to call it. And as authors are wont to do, they will go out on a book tour. And Geddy Lee is no exception to the rule. The book is called My Effin' Life, coming out here in a few weeks, maybe a month. Like to see the price come down a little bit, Amazon. I believe it was still pre-order price, same as the list price, which means full price, $36. But Geddy Lee's spoken word tour for My Effin' Life, or we can just call it a book tour, will be through North America in November and December here in 2023. 14 dates. Again, probably got to be rich, lucky. That's kind of the way things are going right now with concerts and anything involving celebrities, football games, the NFL, even college football for the bigger schools. You pretty much have got to be a millionaire to even think about going. So if you are, just like with nights 2 and 3 of the Power Trip Festival, with the Eagles, especially the Eagles, especially with U2 in Vegas, and now with Geddy Lee, have at it. In merchandise news, here as we're going to wrap up news of the world. Now, I'll admit, there was a time, and I regret it. I regret it. It was fun at the time. I was young. I was stupid. All the way through my 20s, my 30s, maybe creeping even into my 40s. I loved memorabilia. I loved sports memorabilia, rock and roll memorabilia, pop culture memorabilia. And that market never really truly dies, of course. Pop Funko figures are still big. But now the prices have gotten ridiculous. Outside of maybe those Pop Funko figures, those are still affordable. But when I was a kid, an action figure cost $4 or $5, and that carried through from the 70s into the 80s, even into the 90s, the early 90s. Starting lineup figures, if you're into sports, and of course, baseball cards and all that stuff. Then we got people like Todd McFarlane getting into it and making these collectibles almost works of art in the detail. So, of course, the companies decided we better jack the prices up. So now you can't get an action figure, a rock and roll figure for anything less than, what, $10? And that's little teeny tiny, maybe a 5-inch figure. Full size, maybe more like a 7-8 inch figure is running $15, and they are poor quality, poor detail. Where am I going with this? Maestro, where are you going with this? Well, part of the collecting craze, and it's been like this for decades and decades and decades, was Barbie. Not just the original Barbie figure. I don't even know if they are considered so much of collector's items. I'm sure there are some out there that are, but remember when they started making like Wonder Woman, Barbie, stuff like that? Specialized Barbie dolls based on pop culture characters, female pop culture characters, of course. Well, the latest Barbie will feature or will be Stevie Nicks. So there you go. Again, rich people, you want to go out and buy a Stevie Nicks Barbie doll, have at it. As I mentioned, I indulged way too much in the collector's craze of the late 80s, early 90s, all the way into the early 2000s. You want to go down that road, have at it. Okay, now finally, with merchandise in mind, Black Friday Record Store Day. The releases have been announced. Now, have I ever bought anything at Record Store Day? Yes, technically. I didn't wait in line. I didn't, go crazy in terms of spending hundreds and hundreds of dollars. I'm not a big vinyl guy. That's the thing. This resurgence of vinyl, I have no desire. It holds no appeal to me whatsoever. I think records are clunky, awkward, and inconvenient. I'd rather just put a CD in and I'm good. But sometimes you get the exclusive stuff with Record Store Day. So one time I did later in the day. I didn't, again, not wait in line. Later in the day, I went into my local record store a few years back with my daughter and bought an LP called The Living Room, which was kind of an offshoot of Collective Soul trying to emulate the Cars. And it's a fantastic album. So in that one instance, yes, I did break down, spend $20 on a vinyl album. So some of these, I don't think they ever released The Living Room on CD. So am I glad I bought that one? Yes, absolutely. It is one of my few treasured albums, vinyl albums that I still own. So for Black Friday Record Store Day this year, I'm tempted. I am tempted. But I'm a little confused as well, because we've got some exclusive quote unquote releases, and then we've got some first quote unquote releases. I don't know if first means first on vinyl for Black Friday Record Store Day, and then they're going with CD versions as well, or does that mean it's going to be on vinyl exclusively but available through other outlets outside of the small independent record stores that, of course, Record Store Day is trying to promote and prop up? So a few of the exclusive items you can buy on Black Friday at your local independent record store. The Doors, a new live 2 LP album, and a new Motley Crue 12-inch. These are exclusives, so if you want them, go get them. And of course, check out the Record Store Day website for more detail about all the dozens and dozens of releases that are going to be available. Now, for me personally, there are a couple quote-unquote first releases that I am really intrigued by, including a brand new Collective Soul live LP. Again, will it come out on CD since it's a first and not an exclusive? Also, a brand new Knack live album. Of course, not brand new in the sense the Knack are no longer together, but a brand new live recording released for the first time. Two of my favorite bands of all time, Collective Soul and the Knack, with brand new live albums coming out as quote-unquote first releases on Record Store Day this Black Friday. So those two intrigue me greatly. And then Joan Jett will also have a release, a first quote-unquote release on Black Friday Record Store Day. And that is going to do it for News of the World. Segment 1 is over and done. But like I said, plenty more road to cover here on episode 112 of The Fortress of Rock. I am the Maestro, Kevin Crane. As always, very appreciative, very glad to have you aboard here with me each and every Friday night to talk about the music that we love. New music is up next. Breakdown. Our tribute to Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers. Quick promo break, and I will be right back. Thank you so much for tuning in to the Fortress of Rock podcast with me, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Of course, that was segment 1, the News of the World, our tribute to Freddie Mercury and Queen, where we look back at the past week in rock and roll and all the news and all the controversies that you deserve to know about. Next up is the heart of the show, the meat and potatoes, Breakdown, where we are going to review all the new songs, all the new albums, all the new concert tours, the shows that I've seen personally. Stay tuned for that. Of course, we're now available on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. Hang out, kids. We'll be right back. Welcome back, everybody, to the Fortress of Rock. I am your host, the Maestro, Kevin Crane. Episode 112 here, October the 6th, 2023. Segment 2, as always, Breakdown, where we look at the best in new music, concerts, singles. An interesting array this week, let's put it that way. Some great, some really good, and some awful. Let's start off with our featured album review of the week. You remember him as the de facto leader of the Stray Cats and, of course, the Brian Setzer Orchestra. But maybe he is least well known for his solo career, which is a shame because he has put out some great solo albums. Not talking about the Brian Setzer Orchestra and that stuff. Now, I have mentioned, and this is going to tie into something later on in segment 3. I want to go back. I love to rediscover artists that I'd forgotten about, that I've kind of pushed off to the side. Not like Rival Sons, where you discover a band that you never knew about. And you guys know I've been on that bandwagon now for a year and a half. I just happened to stumble upon a podcast from the great Eddie Trunk a month ago where he interviewed Rival Sons talking about how he thinks they're phenomenal. But I did not know one thing about them before they opened for Greta Van Fleet last February. It's a little bit different when you got somebody like Brian Setzer, who you know about, who you actually listened to the debut album way, way back, over 2 decades ago. The Knife Feels Like Justice, which was just an incredible album, but I never really had it. I think believe it or not, irony, going back to the last segment, I believe I had it on vinyl. So that'll tell you how old the album is, how long ago Brian Setzer put out his first solo album. But again, as I talked about last segment, I personally find LPs cumbersome and inconvenient. Never picked up the CD. And of course, now CDs are fading out. But hearing on Spotify a song from his brand new solo album, The Devil Always Collects, brought me back into the fold. I immediately went out, bought the MP3 version of The Knife Feels Like Justice, burned a copy for myself on CD for the car, and of course, bought the brand new album, which we're going to review right now. Yes, it is The Devil Always Collects by Brian Setzer. And as we are wont to do here, with a few exceptions, we go track by track through the 11 songs on Brian Setzer's latest solo album. Now, this album starts out unbelievably strong. Now, if you know Brian Setzer, of course, you know the Stray Cats. This album's sound does not stray far from that rockabilly Stray Cats sound. Whereas that first solo album that I love so much kind of sounded a little bit more like maybe he was trying to meld that rockabilly sound with more of a Heartland John Mellencamp feel. This is more rockabilly, straight ahead, old Stray Cats type stuff. So first up, we get Rock Boys Rock, with a bunch of women in the chorus singing, "Rock Boys Rock, plug it in the box, show me what you got." Absolutely no sexual innuendo there whatsoever, but we're talking about guitars and playing live in a concert situation. So, no, there's nothing wrong with saying plug it in the box and show me what you got, which makes the song incredibly fun. Something sorely lacking in this world nowadays. So we're off to a good start. Then we get the title track, arguably the best song on the album, The Devil Always Collects. Strong original composition by Brian Setzer. And of course, it's that whole, we've heard all the myths, the stories, the legends, the Crossroads demon. Sell your soul to play the guitar better than anybody else. In a way, that's what this song addresses. And it does it brilliantly. It's a cleverly written song, musically and lyrically. Great, great song, the title track. And then we've already talked about here recently, song 3, another standout. Girl on the Billboard. Again, you get that fast-paced rockabilly going. Again, a well-written, clever song, especially when you listen to the lyrics. Read into them a little bit. It's that typical tragic driver on the road song. Rock and Roll All Night comes to mind. Dead Man's Curve, maybe. Jan and Dean comes to mind. But this one's a little more up-tempo, not necessarily tragic in the sense of the tone and the feel of the song. Now, this is a cover. Now, there are a bunch of covers on this album. I'd say 3 good covers. This was originally a song that was a hit, a country hit in the 60s, the mid-60s. But Brian Setzer just takes it, makes it his own, and knocks it out of the park. And when I reviewed this, this was the song that brought me back, that I just alluded to a few minutes ago. This is the song that brought me back to Brian Setzer. And even though it's a cover song, which I guess I kind of should downgrade it just a little bit. I don't know why. When my favorite band of all time, Van Halen, lived and breathed cover songs. But now we're talking 3 songs in on this album, absolutely top-notch, stellar. Then I believe song 4 is another cover, The Living Dead. I liked it, but it kind of brings things down a little bit from the unbelievable quality of the first 3 songs. It's catchy. It will get in your head and it will stick in your head, just like the first 3. So in that sense, it's good. It's just in terms of intensity, in terms of fun, The Living Dead kind of sludges along like The Walking Dead with its pace. Still not a bad song at all. Then we're getting more into now the area where I think Brian Setzer ran out of really good creative ideas outside of just let's do the generic Stray Cats rockabilly stuff. And that's what kicks in with What'll It Be, Baby Doll? Not a fan. Not a fan. You gotta give me more creative stuff. You gotta give me more energy. You've gotta give me better lyrics. Otherwise, you're just sounding like you're a cover band in a Nashville roadhouse. Now, things get better again with track 6, Black Leather Jacket, showing again when he's on as a songwriter, when he's on and when he is focused, he can put together absolutely killer tunes. Black Leather Jacket, right up there, quality-wise, with the first 3 songs on The Devil Always Collects. Then, unfortunately, we get back into the sludge, back into the mediocre, tepid, generic rockabilly stuff with track 7. She's got a lot of soul. And then his cover, a Nick Lowe cover, track 8, Play That Fast Thing One More Time. They just didn't really do anything for me, these 2 songs, track 7 and 8. Track 9 is a little bit better. A doodle do, what a doodle do. Try to say that 15 times fast. It's an interesting, fun concept, but it wears thin after the first minute and a half. If you listen to the song, you'll know what I'm saying. Again, starts out like a fun little lyrical twist. It wears thin pretty quick. Then track 10 is Psycho Susie. To me, it just goes back again to the generic rockabilly stuff. The lyrics maybe are a little bit more interesting and clever. Then finally, we close out The Devil Always Collects with One Particular Chick. Now, again, we're looking at the best and the worst of Brian Setzer, where if he ups his game, if he sits down and actually goes out to write something a little bit above the fray, a little bit better than bands that didn't make it, Brian Setzer made it. So some of these songs where they just don't have that extra level of songwriting and musicianship are disappointing. One Particular Chick is Brian Setzer at his best. Great song to close out the album. Just it encompasses that mood, that feel, the really good rockabilly side of Brian Setzer. So we look back at these 11 songs and it's hit and miss, but I'm telling you, the high points definitely outweigh the mediocre on The Devil Always Collects. So I recommend it because the lows aren't that bad. The low points are not awful, terrible. They're just nice background noise till you get to the next great song where you're tapping your feet and moving and grooving around your living room. I highly recommend The Devil Always Collects because, again, you've got so many great, great, great moments on the album as opposed to the handful of mediocre, middle of the road songs, again, that are not all that bad when you put everything in perspective. So go out on Spotify or Pandora or wherever you listen to your music and listen to The Devil Always Collects from Brian Setzer. All right, 3 new songs to review this week. I'm trying to figure out what order I want to do these in because we've got one great, one good, and one abysmal. So let's start off with the good. How about that? Second single from Dokken's upcoming album, When Heaven Comes Down, is Gypsy. Now, I love the first single, Fugitive. Gypsy isn't quite as good. It's not bad. Again, kind of like some of the lesser moments on Brian Setzer's album. You know Don Dokken and company can do better. Gypsy is an interesting song lyrically. It seems like he's almost keeping the tempo down, the energy of the band down. And it hurts the song. And I'm not going to say it's an awful second release. It's just not for me. It's not terrible. It's just I would have expected a little bit better. A little bit better as a second single. But I will still listen to, probably buy, and of course review When Heaven Comes Down when it's released. So I can't recommend it unless you're a diehard Dokken fan. You got to listen to it. You're going to listen to it anyway, so. But casual fans probably want to pass on Gypsy. Let's do good. Really, really good. No, let's do great. Let's do great. The second single from Rival Sons, their upcoming, I call it a mini album, a mini LP. I still don't know how 6 songs constitutes a full album unless you're Rush or Zeppelin or Yes, where you know every song's going to be 8, 9, 10 minutes. Rival Sons, Lightbringer, their second album of 2023. Of course, the first single was Sweet Life, which was great. And the second single is Mercy, which might actually be better. Mercy has got a ridiculously killer guitar hook. And if you have listened to Rival Sons, and I hope after every week here for the last year and a half, me pimping them to you, you finally went out and listened to some of their music, newer and older. Their productions are fuzzy, old school. They're not necessarily clean and neat and pristine, but that's what makes these songs great. And again, Mercy is no exception. I cannot wait for Lightbringer coming out here in a few weeks. Mercy, definitely, you've got to check it out. Yes, I am now a Rival Sons sycophant. I can't get enough of them. I've completed my collection. I have all of their albums, including their EP from early on. And I will tell you, I'm not overly impressed with their first full-length album, Before the Fire. But beyond that, the EP and everything after Before the Fire, ridiculously good. Ridiculously good. So yeah, I saved the worst for last. And now by process of elimination, you know what that is. After getting a leadoff single that sounded pretty good, hearkening back in a way to maybe the 80s version of the Rolling Stones, catchy, not quite as edgy as the 70s Stones, but Angry was not a bad song. Not bad at all. So you figure the second single from their upcoming new album, Hackney Diamonds, maybe you get something a little bit off the beaten path, maybe you get something a little bit more rocking, a little bit more edgy. Before you know, you're going to get the inevitable maybe power ballad, like Waiting on a Friend type song as the Rolling Stones get older and older. And of course, as these bands and these performers get older and older, they lose their edge. They do. But we're all interested to see what they're going to do with it. Their talent, their songwriting skills, their musicianship as they get older and can't play as fast, can't sing as well. So the Rolling Stones decided for their second single off Hackney Diamonds to give us one of the worst songs I have ever heard in my life. You can listen to it if you want to subject yourself to this. And you can say I'm wrong and I'm overstating it. I am overstating my criticism. I'm overstating how bad this song is. I hate it. Hate, 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 hate it. My parents told me do not use the word hate. I kind of like to use it because it conveys absolute, abject disappointment in a person, a movie, a band, a sports team. I dislike the Chicago Bears. Come on, you hate the Bears. Now they won last night, so Bears fans are probably not disliking the team as much, but you get where I'm going with this using the sports analogy. Sweet Sounds of Heaven. Now, get this. There are two versions. The edited version, of course, we know that is a grand and pathetic tradition. When rock radio was big, they would edit songs down because we can't really have a 5.5 or 6 minute version of a song. It takes up too much time. So you're going to have to cut something out and edit it down. My Sharona has always been to me the most egregious, pathetic example of a song that had a radio edit because they cut out arguably one of the greatest guitar solos of all time. Bert Navarre's guitar solo on My Sharona, if you listen to the full version, is ridiculously good. But no, the song is too long with that. You got to cut the guitar solo down. And even though the radio edit is still one of the greatest songs of all time, it's not nearly as good as the full album version. So where am I going with this? Well, this stinker of a song, Sweet Sounds of Heaven, from the Rolling Stones, featuring Stevie Wonder on keyboards. And basically, we're looking at a duet between Mick Jagger and Lady Gaga. So yeah, Stevie Wonder piano, keyboards, and Lady Gaga sounding like an alley cat stuck in a dumpster. And I'm not saying she's not talented. This is a one-time criticism of her. She's not for me, but I know she's talented. This song is just wrong on all levels. This is the kind of pretentious faux gospel crap. And I'll use some allusions here that some people might be uncomfortable with. Not language, but I hate it when white artists, as is the case here with Mick Jagger and Lady Gaga, take on this whole gospel feel. And they sit there and they try to, especially with Lady Gaga in this instance, sing like an Aretha Franklin or any other great female gospel singer. A friend of mine said the only white guy that could pull it off was Elvis Presley. But this is like, it's almost insulting, in my opinion. You better be able, if you're going to go down this road, better be able to pull this off without a single flaw. Because it's just not stylistically what Mick Jagger should be doing. And I think Lady Gaga embarrasses herself because all she does is wail and scream for, get this. This is where I go back to the radio edit discussion from a minute ago. There are two versions. The radio edit version, which is in and itself just awful. And then there is a 7-minute, yes, 7-minute version of this that will be on the album. Lyrically, this song has nothing to offer. Basically, it is Mick Jagger and Lady Gaga going back and forth singing, "Sweet sounds of heaven, sweet sounds of heaven." Yeah, Stevie Wonder's not getting in on this in terms of singing. He's just playing piano. This is an absolute nothing burger of a song. And again, gospel music, whether you like to hear it or not, is predominantly a black form of music because it's embedded in tradition. It's done better by a lot of African American artists, a lot better. And again, I get a little tired of the pretentiousness of white performers just assuming they can go in and do this. Listen to Sweet Sounds of Heaven if you dare, and tell me if I'm wrong. And look back and think back and even go dig up some of the great African American gospel singers and listen to them. And then listen to this crap from the Rolling Stones with Lady Gaga. And you tell me if it's not embarrassing and uncomfortable beyond belief. I canceled my order, by the way. I canceled my order. I only do this once a year or so. I did it earlier this year with Greta Van Fleet and how awful they sound now. I canceled my order for Hackney Diamonds because of how terrible and awful Sweet Sounds of Heaven is. So again, if you are a music masochist and you want to subject yourself to this garbage, or you just want to see, like driving by a car wreck and you want to rubberneck, you go ahead and listen to this. Listen to the full 7-minute version and see if you're not coming out of it kicking yourself. That's 7 minutes of my life I'll never get back. Awful. Doc Brown shaking his head, looking at me, basically telling me, I hope you didn't expend all your energy on that little rant there because we have got a lot of work to do in the rock and roll time stream. We're heading out to the garage, firing up the DeLorean to 1.21 gigawatts. It is time for I Want to Go Back after one more quick promo break. I'm the Maestro. We'll be right back here on the Fortress of Rock. All right, now that we've looked at the current state of music in our breakdown segment, it is time to climb into the DeLorean and travel back in time to look back at moments in rock and roll history, birthdays, deaths, anniversaries of song and album releases. It is time for I Want to Go Back, our tribute to Eddie Money. Stay tuned. And as always, we're on Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Cast, and Radio Public, anywhere where you listen to your favorite podcasts. All right, everybody. Very, very fun segment here, as always. They're all fun. But we all like to take a trip down memory lane. And that's what segment 3 here each and every Friday night on the Fortress of Rock is all about. I Want to Go Back. Our tribute, of course, to the late, great Eddie Money, where we go back in time and look at anniversaries of classic album releases, birthdays, moments in rock and roll history. But as Doc Brown gets us into the time stream with the Rock and Roll DeLorean, we'll take care of some business here real quick. You found us somewhere. You're listening to the dulcet tones of my voice, soothing and pleasing as they are. But wherever you found us out there in podcast land, you have options. The Fortress of Rock is available currently on Spotify, Google, Radio Public, Pocket Casts, Apple, Overcast, Castbox, Amazon Music, Audible, and iHeartRadio. And of course, do not forget to check out the Facebook page. Always have fun stuff going on every weekend. Not only do you find a link to the latest episode of the Fortress of Rock, but every Friday night, right around the time we post the new episode, we start the Weekend Rock Project. This week, looking for your favorite rock and roll songs with a brand name in the title. Could be difficult, could be easy. I threw out Blondie's cover of The Tide is High. Tide, get it? So let's see what you come up with. We keep it open all weekend, all through Sunday afternoon. Give us your best shot. And then, of course, the stories, the ideas that we put out each and every week here, specifically in this segment and in segment 1, News of the World. As much as I would like to take credit for it with my brain full of rock and roll knowledge, I cannot take credit for it. I have to do some scouring and searching on the internet to get a lot of these story ideas, although my embellishments, my tangents, and my opinions, that's all mine and mine alone. But my 3 main sources for a lot of the ideas and story tidbits and nuggets come from ultimateclassicrock.com, thisdayinmusic.com, and when it comes to Van Halen, the mighty Van Halen News Desk. And this is a jam-packed and very sorrowful I Want to Go Back. We'll start off with, unfortunately, a lot of death in the world of music and rock and roll, but none, to me personally, bigger than October the 6th, 2020 was the day we lost Edward Van Halen. Now, over the past few years, you guys know how much Van Halen has meant to me. In many ways, they were a band that kept me going through tough times as a teenager, even in my adulthood. They were dependable, reliable. With new music, with their catalog, I could always turn to them and the great guitar playing of Eddie Van Halen to get me through the tough times in life. That's what music, that's what rock and roll is supposed to do for you. But none did it better for me than Van Halen. I just wonder how much more we would have gotten out of Eddie. He died too young. I wonder how many more tours we would have gotten. Would he have stuck with David Lee Roth? Would Wolfgang Van Halen have stayed in the band? So we never would have gotten Mammoth WVH. Poor Alex Van Halen now seems like a recluse. Doesn't really want to do anything with his brother gone. And I'm sure there's a lot of people out there with siblings who can understand that. This day will always, I can't say it's a special day. That's the wrong word. Significant. It will always be a significant day in my life going forward till the day I die. Knowing that October the 6th was the day that the greatest guitar player of all time left us. As always, thoughts and prayers every year on this day to Wolfgang Van Halen, Alex Van Halen, the whole Van Halen family, Valerie Bertinelli, everybody who knew and loved Eddie Van Halen. Now, also on this day, not trying to diminish anyone, we all remember the classic song, I Can See Clearly Now. The rain is gone. I can see all obstacles in my way. And that song has endured. You can still hear it on the radio on adult contemporary, if that's still a thing, if that's what they call it, or 60s and 70s classic hits radio. But Johnny Nash, that was his song. And he unfortunately passed away on the same day as Eddie Van Halen. Unfortunately, we're not done yet. We move back a year to October the 6th, 2019. Considered one of the greatest drummers of all time, Ginger Baker of Cream passed away on this day in 2019. Also on this day in 2019, Larry Junstrom. You might sit there and go, who? Who? This is one of those sneaky important figures in rock and roll history. Founding bass player for Lynyrd Skynyrd, eventually moved on to join a different Van Zant band, ended up playing bass in 38 Special. Larry Junstrom passed away on this day in 2019. And then we're going to get a little funky here. You guys know how much I love my disco and my R&B from the 70s. Now, most people remember the band Heatwave for the tepid ballad, Barely Tolerable Ballad, Always and Forever. I remember them more for the awesome Boogie Nights. Boogie Nights. What an awesome song. What a great memory from the 70s. If you want a boogie, got the boogie. Boogie, Boogie Nights. What a lot of people don't know is after Heatwave, their leader, Rod Temperton, went on to write a lot of hits for one Michael Jackson, including Thriller, Rock With You, and Off the Wall. So Rod Temperton, unfortunately, died on this day in 2016. Much like Larry Youngstrom, an underappreciated yet extremely significant member of the R&B, rock, pop community that we celebrate here. Thoughts and prayers to everyone. Such a downer couple of minutes here. Rod Temperton, Ginger Baker, Johnny Nash, Larry Youngstrom, and of course, Edward Van Halen. So we'll move away from death, but I don't know if we're going to go anywhere much better. Musically, at least. October the 6th, 2011, I found this to be a very interesting little historical tidbit. Rolling Stone released the results of a poll. The worst song of the 80s. Now, I love the 80s. Was there some bad stuff in the 80s? Of course there was. But I have my issues with the top 5 in this poll. Now, of course, Rolling Stone pandered to pretentious music snobs far and wide, hippy dippies. But I'll agree with them on the worst. Without doing a lot of research on it, I will agree with them on the worst song of the 80s. That would be Starship's We Built This City. It's grating. Now, is it my worst song of all time personally? No. No. That would be You Light Up My Life by Debbie Boone. But I'll tell you this, I'll take We Built This City any day over that garbage Rolling Stone song we just reviewed in the last segment. So can I see where We Built This City in terms of popular songs? Was the worst song of the 80s? Sure. I'll pile on. But really, it's not close to the worst song of all time. Not even close. Now, some other little notes on the top 5 worst songs of the 80s in this poll. How is The Final Countdown by Europe number 2? That song still to this day gets played a ton on the radio. The keyboard hook gets in your head and will not let you go. How is The Final Countdown the second worst song of the 80s in this ridiculous poll? Now, Wham is in there, Wake Me Up Before You Go Go. Personally, I don't mind it. Not one of my favorites, but not bad. And then before we got to move on. I got to move on from this. Arguably worse than The Final Countdown at number 2. The Safety Dance by Men Without Hats is considered the 5th worst song of the 80s in this poll. The Safety Dance is an awesome song. It is an awesome song. It was just featured last year, I believe, in a Super Bowl commercial. If it's so bad, why are they using it in commercials here 25 years almost into the next century? The Safety Dance is killer. How dare they vote this song into the top 5? All those readers back then. I should tell Doc Brown to go back to 2011, drop us in so I can start campaigning, maybe voting multiple times to make sure the Safety Dance is not one of the 5 worst songs of the 80s in this stupid poll. All right. Sorry, I spent too much time on that. October the 6th, 1979, the final, you can say coda, but coda was a cobbled together afterthought. The final Led Zeppelin album, In Through the Outdoor, was number 1 in the US on this day, 1979. And then finally, before we move on to birthdays, October the 6th, 1969. Now, the Beatles had a lot of significant singles. Yes, back when singles 45s were selling at ridiculous paces, outselling albums. The double-sided hit, Something, and Come Together, released on this day in 1969. Of course, Someday. What am I thinking of? Marshall Crenshaw, Someday, Some Way. Something was significant because, number one, it was chosen as the A side, whereas Come Together was chosen as the B side. But for Lennon and McCartney to let George Harrison have the A side for one of his compositions was very significant. Now, of course, we're getting close at this point in time to the Beatles breaking up, so maybe it was a peace offering. But of course, now I am not a huge Beatles fan, but when I say that, how can you not be a Beatles fan with so many great, great songs? Now, I will still argue to this day, I think I Am the Walrus is one of the dumbest songs of all time. Cuckoo, cuckoo. But you put together Something, gorgeous, gorgeous song from George Harrison. And of course, who can dispute the greatness of Come Together? A 1-2 punch, released as a single, A-side and B-side, on this day in 1969. Moving on to birthdays. October the 6th, 1975, Patrick Keeler. Who? What? Here's another one. Maestro. Who is this? You know who Jack White is, right? Right? You should know who Jack White is. And you know Jack White, solo career, of course, the White Stripes with Meg. But remember, he also, because he is a busybody like a Dave Grohl, like a Miles Kennedy, got to keep swimming like a shark. Keep working, keep working, keep working. So he had the Dead Weather as a side project and the fantastic, underrated Raconteurs. If you have not listened to a Raconteurs album, I believe there's 3 of them out there, do yourself a favor. Jack White's best work outside of some of the stuff he did with the White Stripes. And Patrick Keeler was the drummer for the Raconteurs, born on this day in 1975. October the 6th, 1966. One of those bands that the critics loved and fawned over. They never quite caught on popularity-wise. They had a hit or two. They are looked back upon, though, as one of the most significant, underrated, influential bands in rock history. Tommy Stinson was born on this day in 1966. He was the bass player for the Replacements. Now, I mentioned there was going to be a connection here at some point I want to go back to Brian Setzer and that rediscovering an artist or a band that you had pretty much written off, forgotten about, put on the back burner. Well, now we get to that point. Born on this day in 1954, David Hidalgo, one of the primary singers, songwriters, guitarists for Los Lobos. Yeah, you forgot about them too, didn't you? Los Lobos, I completely forgotten about how much I loved them and how overlooked and underrated of an 80s band. Yes, they were an 80s band. How completely neglected they were. I know I don't know if I had the cassettes or the albums, but How Will the Wolf Survive, released in 1984, and By the Light of the Moon in 1987 were two ridiculously good albums. Doing my research for this episode, I actually went on Amazon and was going to look and see if I could pick up those two CDs. Extremely hard to find any of the back catalog of Los Lobos. Now, they've got some recent music. You can get a new album from them, I believe, only a year or two old. They're still alive and kicking and out there and rocking and rolling. But luckily, something in the back of my rock and roll brain told me, among my thousands of CDs, you've got Los Lobos. And sure enough, I was able to dig up the compilation. I found it buried under a whole bunch of other box sets. Just Another Band from East LA, the Los Lobos collection, which has all the best stuff from those two fantastic albums I mentioned. But of course, most people remember Los Lobos for their cover songs from La Bamba. Of course, the title track being the most significant, a number one song for them, as they honored the late, great Ritchie Valens. Absolutely nothing wrong with that. But I'm telling you, I'm imploring you, get on Spotify, get on Pandora, and listen to How Will the Wolf Survive and By the Light of the Moon. Great, great albums. Glad that I have now rediscovered Los Lobos. A band I do not need to rediscover because they have been one of the most influential and important bands throughout my life. We've already talked about Van Halen. Nobody tops Van Halen. But one of the first great concerts I ever saw, one of the biggest albums among my peers and I growing up in high school, was High Infidelity. Now, I have a love-hate relationship with Kevin Cronin of REO Speedwagon, born on this day in 1951, because while he brought more of a mainstream sensibility to REO Speedwagon, he also eventually dragged them down into generic, awful pop and awful ballads that took away the edge and the synergy that REO Speedwagon had in the late 70s through the early 80s. I would say all the way through the album Good Trouble, the follow-up to High Infidelity, which was woefully overlooked. Good Trouble is I mean, a fantastic album. But again, I think because you're never going to match the popularity of High Infidelity, after Good Trouble, I won't say tanked, but underperformed, I think they decided, well, look how great Keep On Lovin' You did for us off High Infidelity. We should do more songs like that. And that's where REO Speedwagon spiraled in the bowl and got flushed by rock fans like me. I was listening to their greatest hits the other day, and I didn't know that Kevin Cronin's birthday was coming up. I just happened to decide, let's bring in, got to play music that's not edgy at work, that's not going to offend anybody. So REO, bring that in. If you listen to the songs on their greatest hits from about 1983 back versus what they put out after 83, vastly different tone, vastly different energy level. And I'm sorry, I blame that on Kevin Cronin. Now, he's going to tell me, well, look at me. I'm still touring with this band. I'm still the de facto leader of this band, even though almost all the original members are gone. I believe all of them are gone, with Neil Dowdy leaving the band, the keyboard player here recently, and retiring. I know Bruce Hall is still with him, but Bruce Hall, as great as Bruce Hall is as a bass player, and of course sings the song Back on the Road Again, which is one of REO's best. Of course, Gary Richrath has left us. Alan Gratzer, I believe, retired as well years ago. You can say Kevin Cronin has nothing to be ashamed of, and you're probably right, but I still think REO Speedwagon, as great as they were, should be in the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame. We've discussed that. It'll come up again in the future. So again, some good, some bad with Kevin Cronin and his influence on REO Speedwagon. I'm getting all choked up thinking about his birthday. Not. And by the way, to wrap this up, another reason I'm not a big fan, we're talking about bad songs of all time. We just talked about that Rolling Stone poll. How about you throw Can't Fight This Feeling into the mix for worst song of the 80s? That's a Kevin Cronin turd is what that is. That's a piece of garbage. That is one of the worst songs of the 80s. You can throw Open Arms by Journey in there as well. And I love Journey and I love REO. But again, Steve Perry, Kevin Cronin were not the most important people in those bands when it came to giving those bands a harder edge. We all know Neil Schon is the man with Journey, for better or for worse with him too. But I think once Gary Richrath had his issues, dropped out of favor with the band, and eventually was out of REO, that band lost a lot of personality and grit. All right, finally, Doc Brown telling me we got to get back into the garage. It's starting to rain. Storms are coming. We got to pull the car in. The DeLorean's got to get settled in, pull up the drawbridge over the moat. One last birthday to discuss here. We talked about Rod Temperton of Heatwave in our anniversary segment within a segment. Our last birthday, October the 6th, 1949, Thomas McClary played guitars for the mighty Commodores. Just like Heatwave, one of the greatest pop R&B bands of the mid to late 70s. Having fun here, kids. Having a lot of fun. But we're not done yet. Yeah, you're going to have to suffer through one more awkward, outdated promo. And I know I should update them. And I will at some point. But only 24 hours in a day between work and tending house and all that stuff you guys have to do as well. More important to get the content out there than to polish up the bells and the whistles. But a couple more minutes left as we wrap things up and tell you what's coming up in the next month or so here on the Fortress of Rock. Stick with me for just a few more minutes and we will get you on your way for the weekend. I'll be right back. Well, we hope you enjoyed our trip back in time, looking back at the anniversaries, the classic moments in rock and roll history. But of course, the DeLorean works both ways. So now we have to move forward. The last segment here, as always, on the Fortress of Rock with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Spotify, Anchor, Apple, Stitcher, Castbox, Google, Pocket Casts, Radio Public, wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. It's all about the future. What's coming out here in the next month or two? What songs? What albums? What concert tours? That's why we call it Wrap It Up. Thanks to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Thanks to you for hanging out. Here comes our final segment. All right, everybody, welcome back. Thank you so much for hanging out here on Friday night, October the 6th, 2023, with me, the Maestro Kevin Crane. Gonna wrap it up. Episode 112. Wrap it up, of course, our tribute to the fabulous Thunderbirds. Here for the last couple minutes, gonna discuss what you can expect from me from the Fortress of Rock in terms of new music reviews, basically through the end of October, and then maybe some hints, some clues as to what's coming up in the month of November. Next week, episode 113 will feature the new album from Wilco, Cousin. That will be our featured album review. Now, in 2 weeks, episode 114 is going to be a gray area. We have got a ton of new music coming out after that week, so we will have plenty to get us through once we get to our October 27th episode all the way through November into December. Plenty of new albums to discuss, but in 2 weeks, episode 114, still working on it. Still kind of feeling my way through what we're going to be reviewing for new music. Tentatively, we might go off the beaten path a little bit. You guys know I love Hootie and the Blowfish. So we might actually review Darius Rucker's new country album. One of the few country artists I will listen to. I know. It's the Fortress of Rock, Maestro, but Darius Rucker, I kind of give him a pass. Then, like I mentioned, once we get to episode 115 on the 27th, we're good to go for pretty much the rest of the year. The highly anticipated, long-awaited second album of 2023 from the Rival Sons, Lightbringer, will be our featured review. Did you have any doubts? Episode 115 on October the 27th, Lightbringer by Rival Sons will be our featured album review. And then after that, we've got all sorts of new stuff we can choose from. Maybe I'll forgive the Rolling Stones for the atrocity known as Sweet Sounds of Heaven. And maybe I'll review Hackney Diamonds at some point in November. Of course, we talked about Dawkins' new album in November. We'll have that for you. We might kind of break the rules a little bit as we've set them here on the Fortress of Rock and maybe review Night Ranger, their album with the Youth Symphony Orchestra. We got Duran Duran with a weird, bizarre Halloween type album, Dance Macabre, with some remakes, some new stuff, all very dark and bleak themed songs. We've got Mark Tremonti, of course, guitar player for Alter Bridge, putting out his second solo album. Of course, his first was his versions of Frank Sinatra classics. Now he's doing a Christmas album. So as we get closer to the holidays, maybe we will review Mark Tremonti's Christmas album. But plenty of new stuff coming up, kids. You would expect it about this time of the year. Beginning of summer, beginning of the holiday shopping season is when we get the majority of the new music. In terms of songs, we're looking at the new U2 song Atomic City for next week. Of course, we have talked almost ad nauseum about them opening up the Sphere in Las Vegas. Little known, under the radar release from Bruce Springsteen on the soundtrack to a little known movie. The song is Addicted to Romance. Should have that for you next week as well. Couple weeks down the line, the new Blackberry Smoke single, second from their upcoming 2024 album. The song is Little Bit Crazy. And then, of course, we talked about breaking protocol with Night Ranger. We don't usually record, or we don't usually review greatest hits, compilations, cover albums, live albums, and that's kind of where this comes into play with Night Ranger. So where am I going with this? Well, of course, we talked about the fact that today is the anniversary of the passing of Eddie Van Halen. The Collection 2 has just been released, remastered versions of all of the Sammy Hagar era Van Halen albums, including a bonus disc with tracks that maybe some of you do not have. I mean, diehard Van Halen fans, of course, know most of these songs. We're talking about the songs off the Twister soundtrack. We're talking about the 3 new songs that Sammy Hagar did with Van Halen for the Best of Both Worlds double hits collection. But I don't know how many of you out there know about Crossing Over, which might be the lost hidden gem of this whole collection too. Because if you're a Van Halen fan, you've got 5150, you've got OU 812, you got For Unlawful Carnal Knowledge, and maybe you've got Balance. But I've heard this is the only unreleased B-side Van Halen ever put out. The song is Crossing Over. And again, it's been available out there for years and years and decades. But how many of you really have heard the song Crossing Over before? Well, I might indulge myself, motivated, saddened by this anniversary today. And next week, we might discuss the song Crossing Over in breakdown. Again, I don't think a lot of you out there really and truly know this song. Diehard Van Halen fans, of course. But I'm looking at this kind of like a public service where I'm going to expose the masses. Not expose myself to the masses. That would get me landed in jail. Expose this song to the masses. Because probably the best we're going to get in terms of anything close to new Van Halen until somebody gets in the vault and starts sifting through all these tapes and recordings and gets us the long-awaited, what we deserve, comprehensive box set of unreleased tracks, unreleased live songs, demos. We know it's there. And I know Wolfgang Van Halen is very busy, so I get it. Alex Van Halen has no excuse. He needs to get in there and start working on this stuff ASAP. And in a way, he's being petulant. He's denying the fans the music that we love. And we need more. And if there's any more original stuff, raw versions, again, demos, unreleased live tracks, we deserve that. As fans, as people who have supported Van Halen for decades and decades. He does not have a band right now. I don't know what he's doing, but you can't tell me he cannot honor his brother's legacy and get in the vault and get us this stuff to honor his brother. And yes, I'm getting a little upset about it because every month, week, day that goes by, I get older, you get older, all the Van Halen fans out there get older. We're one step closer to dying. We want to hear this music. It's a legacy. Same thing with the so-called tribute concert we've been promised for years. Isn't it amazing how that's come together? And you can tell as time passes, because time is evil. Time takes. It doesn't give, it takes. And so now the enthusiasm is starting to wane. You haven't heard anybody talk about putting together the Van Halen tribute. And sadly, the more time passes, the less and less enthusiasm there's going to be for this tribute show. Shame on Alex Van Halen. Shame on him for letting this happen. I don't blame Wolfgang. Wolfgang has got enough going on. He's trying to establish his own career, his own legacy. But Alex Van Halen has no excuse. Shame on him. And that'll do it for another stellar episode of The Fortress of Rock. I hope you enjoyed it. Very long. Just in a mood to talk tonight. Hope you don't mind it. I'll try to dial it down next week and maybe get us back to an hour and 15, hour and 20 minutes, the normal run time for The Fortress. But for now, for another 7 days, I bid you a fond farewell. I hope you have a great and safe weekend. And of course, love the one you're with. We will chat again in a week. Peace out, kids.